Hello, we are in a special place because we are at Hans-Bernd Schäfer home. Professor Schäfer is well-known economist who have founded or co-founded the movement of law and economics in Europe. And this episode, because in the first one we talk about the first wave, this episode we focus on the second wave of law and economics. The reason we are meeting here is because in Poland we will have the second volume of the book, which is covering now in full your famous book about law and economics, which was originally published in Germany. But then we had several editions. One of them is here, it's in Portuguese, and it becomes the best-selling book in Brazil, correct?
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, let us we discuss the first wave. What is written in the books is, of course, University of Chicago, yes. And then there is this story about starting teaching economic topics within the law school in Chicago. But of course, this is not any novel, because I think in Europe both disciplines were quite close, yes,
Yeah,
as we discussed, until at least the First World War, if not the second one, yes, very close. So this is not so much novel. But then what comes is 1944, that means Hayek is induced to come to Chicago. At the end, he doesn't come. And they start something which is very obvious for us, yes. That means that they start antitrust project, yes, which was run by Aaron Director for many years in Chicago. Well, the reason is very simple. We use economics to judge because we agree that the monopols are not good ones, yes. And this is what we have changed, let's say, towards the end of 19th century and the beginning of 20th, yes. The attitude that the monopoly brings goods to everyone. And then what happens is Ronald Coase is induced to come to America, yes. He is well-known economist, yes, the one, yes, who has written a very famous paper on the firm, yes. By the way, I'm always accused, if I'm talking about economics as a science, yes, that this is mathematics, yes. But what actually Ronald Coase done with his paper on the firm, it's a philosophical question, yes? Why the firms are existing, yes? That's what he wrote. So he comes to Chicago, yes? They gave him a journal, the Journal of Law and Economics, and then he publishes The Problem of Social Costs, which becomes, the founding paper of law and economics movement, even though Ronald Coase was not always that happy to be called the father of law and economics, you know that, yes? But that's not only Ronald Coase, yes, if you agree. Gary Becker, yes? Gary Becker, who is expanding economic sciences. You said that you talked to him, yes, once we talked. Then I said, why is expanding? Because he's not writing his PhD when he is young on the matter of market behavior. He is actually taking the topic on non-market behavior. What he's writing about discrimination, yes, of the color of your skin, yes. That's something novel, yes, because this is not the market behavior, yes. Those are the prejudice. And he proves in his PhD, yes, that this is not good for the economy if you are a racist, correct? It's very general what I'm saying, yes, but so would you say that in '60s suddenly the economic sciences is trying to expand into other social sciences?
Yeah, certainly. And I think the two people who are most have to be credited for this, the most prominent, is Posner and Becker, in my view. You are right, I had once the privilege to talk to Gary Becker on a conference in Washington, and he said, "Well, when I finished my my master degree, I had quite good marks, and so I could go on to write a PhD thesis, and I didn't know what to write. So he said, I went to every professor of the University to Chicago to give me an advice. And he said, I got the advices were all advices were that I should write something on growth theory, which was
famous,
which was in
Picking.
picking up, became very fundamental, very dominant in Chicago. Well, he said either growth theory or business cycle, and he said I was not convinced that. So then he said, I went to the dean and said, I want to write on discrimination, because I think this was a discipline, discrimination, which was for which almost all literature came from sociologists or political scientists, but no economists. And he said that might be I find something new there. And he said that my peers there at the university they were not
happy.
They were not amused about it, but they tolerated. They say, okay. And then he used economic science, rigorous economic science, to analyze discrimination, and he came to some conclusions which are not difficult to understand, but which were new and which were unexpected. So, for instance, even today, discrimination is often and mostly by my legal colleagues regarded as a phenomenon in which those who discriminate exploit those who are discriminated against, which is of course true. But Gary Becker was the first one to notice that if somebody has a taste for discrimination, for instance, for not hiring somebody with a black skin, then he inflicts a damage upon himself, because he cannot hire those who are best qualified. If a black is better qualified than a white, he must hire a white, and that is bad for the economy, but even bad for those who discriminate. So they inflict a damage upon themselves. And such insights he wrote this book, his PhD thesis, which was very mathematical, but this thesis, because it had something new to say, was then read by political scientists who found that something new, something interesting came out of it, and it was therefore on this, there was this cycle through the
political
science and scientists who said, here's somebody who tells us something new which we overlooked, and which you perhaps can only see if you use this economic approach. And it was on this cycle that his book became famous, and he won the Nobel Prize for this book.
Indeed, but you mentioned Richard Posner. We need to explain to the audience that Richard Posner is a fine scholar. He became the judge. He recently stepped down from his positions and he retired. But his main achievement was the book. Yes, that means there were many ideas floating, but he was the one who put into the book, which is the Bible. Yes, the economic analysis of law. Yes, I don't remember how many editions, but there were many editions. And that's something which comes in 70s. But I want to ask you, what is happening in Europe in 70s and 80s? Because you co-founded with Swedes and other nations, the European Association of Law and Economics.
Oh no, I'm not one of the founding fathers of the European Association. I joined the association only when it was already established.
Okay.
Well, but you know, I became a professor at the law school in Hamburg in 1975, and I had to teach economics to law students. And when I started there, I had a colleague and good friend who passed away, unfortunately, more than 10 years ago, Rainer Walz. He wrote, I think in 1971 or 72, he wrote a paper, the first paper on law and economics, as far as my knowledge goes, in Germany, on Coase and on the Coase theorem and on Coase. And we were friends, and he said, when you think about teaching law and economics to law students, you should read law and economics. And he gave me the decisive hint. So I started with a reading group. There were some other colleagues as well, and we met every Monday, and we started to read the texts which were on the market at the time. And that was, of course, Coase. That was Calabresi's book on the cost of accident was already on the market, and Posner and some others, of course, Becker's articles, and so on, and Demsetz and others. And you asked me about Posner, so let me just tell what my experience with Richard Posner was. I had the highest regard for Calabresi, cost of accident, and my own views, also perhaps political views, are much more in line with those of Calabresi than with those of Richard Posner. But what Posner achieved with mistakes he made here and there, he made also mistakes, and so was criticized for this. But what he really achieved is that he took, the way he worked was basically that he took a textbook of the common law and looked to it and saw that to almost everything, to almost every question of the common law,
is in line with economic reasoning. Yes.
Yeah, you can put an economic reasoning on the whole body of the common law, and that this comprehensiveness of Posner, that really impressed me a lot. That you can write a book in which you look through the whole body of law with success and with a gain to explain the law, and not only to explain it, but also gain food for thought for better interpretation of law. And that was, therefore, among all these scholars of law and economics, I have to say that in spite of some reservation to Posner, I regard him, for me, he was the most influential person.
Illuminating, yes.
Illuminating, yeah, absolutely.
In the way of delivering. We have to also remember that after the book, he should not be just regarded as the author of the booklet. Yes, he wrote Economics of Justice and many other books which were very much influential in many regards. But he's not the only one who is the father of law and economics in America. But we have to remember about Henry Manny as well as the others. Gary Becker was already mentioned. But can I, towards the end, again ask about Europe in 80s and 90s? Can you say a few words? As you said, I was not the founding father. I joined them lately after a few years. And how it evolved in Europe, if you could, how do you see this? And we will devote one episode for the future of law and economics, but how was it in 80s, 90s?
Yeah, well, I think the first wave of writing and reading law and economics in Europe and teaching it was in the late 70s and 80s. We had, of course, many lawyers in Germany who had an LLM from the United States. And they were, some of them, quite a few of them, were exposed to law and economics there. For instance, one is Kirchner, Erich Schanze, and some others. And they, for instance, Kirchner, Schanze, they translated the most important writings of Coase and Posner, Demsetz, Calabresi. They translated into German language, and there was a thick book which contained the classical writings of law and economics, which was quite successful, I think. And I think that was the first wave. And of course, economists started teaching this, but also lawyers started teaching it. For instance, the so-called learned hand formula became a staple in taught law classes in the 1980s. I think that today I would guess that there are few students who do not know what the learned hand formula of negligence is in Germany.
Sometimes have the problem with the name learned because they think that we know why it happened, because towards 19th century the parents were giving strange names in America. So learned, that's one of them. But anyway, so you would say that it came to America and has been implemented, yes. We also have to remember about other countries. Stoyanovsky in Great Britain, yes. That's one of the names. I suppose that in France, in Spain, as well as Italy, because of Calabresi, but that was not the only name, yes. So it becomes more and more loud, and I assume that the European Association of Law and Economics, this is a sort of, the gathering of all those scholars in 90s or late 80s.
Yeah, so there were many scholars, many German students who studied for a year in the United States. They came back, and for them this was, what they had learned there was something completely, totally new and unexpected and interesting. And that had an immediate impact on academia in Germany, but also for practical lawyers. I can give you one example. That is a lawyer, a Hamburg-based lawyer, who specialized in the protection of privacy. And, he became famous with this. And he was, his name is Prinz. He's a Hamburg-based lawyer, and he was he got a degree from in an LLM program with Stephen Chevel. So he was exposed to this,
Stephen Chevel,
to the idea, to see legal norms as instruments to incentivize people. And he has really written legal history in Germany by convincing the Supreme Court to change its view on how damage compensation for the encroachment of privacy should be, how the damage compensation should be compensated. There was this case of the Princess of Monaco.
That's a very famous one.
Famous case.
Yes, when it went to the press, then it was proven that the data protection, the image protection was damaged, and that she got a huge compensation, yes, which was based on the number of copies being sold, yes, of newspaper, I think.
Yeah, it was,
but that was above, actually. It's
that
not...
was, yeah, but the point was here that Catherine of Monaco, she went to a restaurant with her child, with her daughter, I think. And it was an Italian restaurant, and they were sitting at the table eating spaghetti. And then the paparazzis came and made photographs of how they eat spaghetti. It was nothing intimate or something like that. It was, of course, forbidden. But what is the damage? Now, you can perhaps say the damage, let's say, 5,000 euros or $5,000. But then these people would laugh, because they made 2-3 pages of about Monaco, Princess of Monaco.
At the Italian restaurant. Yes.
In the Italian restaurant, and that sells very well. And so that would not protect. And he argued, just like we would argue in economics, he argued you must impose a damage compensation which makes the publication of these photographs unprofitable.
Yeah.
So how can you do this? Yeah. How can you do this? He said then, now look, we have here 2 pages or 3 pages. So we simply can look what an advertisement of 1 page costs. And an advertisement of 1 page costs, let's say, 100,000 euros. So if it is 3 pages, then it should at least be 300,000. And this is an economic way of looking at it, and it is insofar not in line with the legal thinking, as the lawyer says, well, the damage compensation must be equal to the damage. But if you just pay the damage, you end up at such low damage compensation that it is not effective.
I fully agree. Let me conclude this episode by my own story, if you allow me.
Sure.
I remember I was called by the rector of Warsaw School of Economics. I come to his office, I sit, and he says to me the following: I would like to offer you to become assistant professor here. My first reaction was, but sir, by origin, by diploma, I'm a lawyer, yes? I have no economic degree, and this is Warsaw School of Economics. And then he immediately said, but you belong to social sciences, and I want you here.
Yeah.
So thank you for this, and let's continue our talks in the next episode and the ones which will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In the second episode, we continue the discussion with Hans-Bernd Schäfer, and this time we talk about the second wave of law and economics, which means things which happened after the Second World War. Of course, they started in America. We talk about famous Ronald Coase when he wrote his paper on the problem of social cause, as well as other projects, and Richard Posner and Gary Becker. But then we talk also about Europe, and we really induce you to look at us because the things are not written in the books what we talk.